Hi, and welcome back to a podcast above a convenience store, talking Twin Peaks. I am Joe Fremming from the Joe Down. With me, as always, is Paul Muad'Dib from Cast That Movie. Paul, how's it going?
It's going well, buddy. How's it going for you?
It's going. It's going, and we have a big episode here.
Yes, we do.
We're deep diving into the strange and wild and twisted history of Twin Peaks, as in the secret history of Twin Peaks by Mark Frost. This was our kind of tie-in, kind of leading us up to the return. It works as a introduction to some new characters, and it fills in the gaps of some of the things that just weren't answered in the return. Obviously, since that was a huge thing and it was more focused on other elements of the show.
Yes.
Uh,
and this book was how you and I started communicating again.
Yeah, neither of us knew the other was into Twin Peaks until we saw each other at the book signing in Minneapolis. Mark Frost was there. I'm walking with my buddy, and lo and behold, there's Paul and his wife.
Yep. And that's when it hit us that, whoa, we're into the same shit.
Yeah, 20 plus years. We never once talked about Twin Peaks to each other.
No, not until this book and The Return came out. It's been 25 years. We hadn't talked to each other about it.
Yeah, we had a lot of other shared interests, but It was just like this is an odd one that just never came up.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're kind of guarded as Twin Peaks fans because we know a lot of people don't get it.
Yeah, we are the weird fandom.
Exactly.
Our fandom isn't, like Star Wars, because this one has a lot more darker, sex abuse shit going on. Yeah, we kind of kept to ourselves.
Yes. So, we sat in for the book signing, and I have my copy of the book in front of me here. And I will never forget this because in my copy, I got him to sign the page that he read for us. So there was a point where he read one of the pages from the books. And so when I went up in line and I got him, I convinced him to sign this particular page for me.
Yeah. And he played audio from the audiobook too.
Oh, God, yeah, he did.
Which featured his father, Warren Frost. Which is a nice tie. Mark, he spent part of his childhood in Minneapolis.
Yes.
His father, Warren, best known as Doc Hayward. He's also Susan Ross's father on Seinfeld. Yes. He was big in the Minneapolis theater scene.
Absolutely.
So. And reading this book, I realized, Calhoun Hospital is kind of a nod to the Lake Calhoun area down in the Twin Cities. So, Warren Frost is reading, and in the audiobook, he plays Douglas Milford.
Yep.
We'll get into him. But
we'll get a lot in the Dougie.
So you got Mark to sign a page. I told Mr. Frost that my dad had me watch the show when it originally aired. And he saw me and he guessed my age, looks me in the eyes like, I hope you had a lot of good therapy over the years.
That's such an awesome story.
Yeah. I realized, because the book had just come out, so I had never even got to read it yet. Nobody had. Right. I think it was released that day.
It was released that day at the book signing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I picked my copy up in Bemidji, and before I drove down there, I should have thought they'd be selling them there, but I wasn't sure. I just didn't know what the turnout was going to be. But so, yeah, it was. And then I found out what he was talking about. Like, he's like amateur history buff. Mm-hmm. He studies. And he was like talking to other people about that. And I really didn't think much about it until I started reading this book. And I think this is a good. Let's jump into it. Let's
Yeah,
jump into the secret history of Twin Peaks.
perfect.
This book operates as a dossier. It's from a crime scene. We meet Tamara Preston, Tammy Preston.
Yep. Who is name is blocked out through the entire book until the very end.
Yes. She is a character in The Return. She aids Gordon Cole and Albert. We'll be getting into that next week when we do The Return. But
yes,
what she's assigned to do is figure out what this dossier is and who put it together. Mm-hmm. The author calls himself the archivist. We find out it's Major Briggs.
Yes.
I had no idea when I started reading this. I was like I had a lot of things going on in life at that time, so like I wasn't as 100% in on the book when I first read it as I should have been. But you knew right away.
I knew right away because I could tell from the way it was written, like just the archivist points in it. I was like, that's how Garland talks. I was like, that's how Briggs talks. And it just as I'm reading the whole thing, and every time it came to his points and the way that it's verbiaged out, it's so awesome because it fits that character so well that right away I heard it in his voice.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. I didn't. I thought I had three. Garland was one of the three people I thought it was going to be. It was either him, Wyndham Earle, or Agent Cooper himself. And just because it's from an outsider's perspective for most of it, looking in, and those are the only three that kind of have that presence in the show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So right after kind of the opening statement, again, as it's written as a dossier, basically it starts with Gordon Cole with a note sending it to Tammy. And
when you read this, do you hear it as David Lynch screaming?
Oh God, yes. Oh God, yes. Dear Agent Blank, the accompanying material is confidential and approved for your eyes only. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the tidbit too I found is this dossier allegedly was found in the basement of Ruth Davenport's apartment building. That's another big thing from The Return. Sure. So this is kind of taking place as The Return's also happening. The final dossier kind of solidifies that.
Absolutely.
With how that book ends. But that'll be our last podcast, will be the final dossier.
Correct.
We'll get into that. But so it operates... Tammy, what Frost is doing is he's taking it from multiple points of view, and he's writing for multiple voices in this, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting is like Tammy, she writes in the margins her notes and observations. We have the archivist's notes and observations. We have letters from characters in the show, from like Audrey Horne to Hank Jennings, to my favorite, which is Hawks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And even like historical figures. And what better way to start off the historical figures and their point of view is how the book starts with Meriwether Lewis.
Yes. Yes.
I start this book and I'm like, well, what the fuck?
And we get our first kind of red herring, which is he talks about a chief, Twisted Hair, who has long, like weird ass gray hair and has the ring. And right away, me and both Joe thought Bob, right?
Yeah. And from us like reviewing the first two seasons, we probably should have saw that as red herrings, like, and then, but yeah, I just, I was like, oh shit, is that Bob? And then like another character comes up called Denver Bob. Frost is doing this deliberately to fuck with us.
Absolutely. I loved it. Yeah, absolutely. So we find out that he gets the ring from Twisted Hair, who tells him, don't wear it, and sends him to where, Joe?
Sends him to what will become Twin Peaks. He sends him up by the waterfalls up to what is Glastonbury Grove.
Glastonbury Grove.
Meriwether Lewis is missing for how long?
Several months.
Several months. This is so the book kind of points out that Glastonbury Grove is where people disappear and odd things happen. We know this from the show, obviously, but we never really know if people have, or other people besides Cooper and Wyndham Earle and Leland have had that experience there. It has, and it's actually happened to characters we get to know in the show.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, Lewis goes there, and he comes back, and he's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, he's different. He is different after that experience.
But he's also so he's discovering the Northwest Passage, and he has two objectives. One is, figuring out, exploring the western side of the states, and the other is through Thomas Jefferson, who's president, looking into like other religions and entities and gods and that sort of thing. We find this out. It's sparked by Jefferson and Lewis, and it has ties to their life within the Freemasons as well.
Yes. Yep.
It's all kind of linked.
Yes, it is. And when he's talking with when you look at the letter from that Jefferson writes about his latest thing, because you don't actually see the dispatch, but one of the interesting things, it's like, for having read his dispatch half a dozen times this morning, I remain firmly convinced this must have been composed while in the grip of fever, perhaps after taking part of some herbal or vegetative compound, either accidentally or given to him by some unidentified native he encountered. Because he's like, this does not make sense.
No. And Lewis, even he sketches out the ring that Twisted Hair hands him, and lo and behold, it's the jade ring that we were introduced to in Fire Walk with Me.
Yes.
This is what I meant when we did. I hinted at it. Secret History made me like. Not only I think it's essential to enjoy the return, but it gives us a compass or a roadmap into kind of understanding the importance of what we're seeing in Fire Walk with Me.
Absolutely. No, this totally, this changed Fire Walk with Me in so many ways. And in the book, he describes what he saw, in these excerpts from Thomas Jefferson, quote, lights from the sky, the silvery spheres, music like some heavenly choir, fire that burns but does not consume, colors unseen or imagined, flowing from all things, gold, all gold, bright and shining. And we know he put the ring on because he says, I should have heeded his warning.
Yeah. As we'll see, this book has three objectives or a couple objectives. I don't want to just limit. It's introducing us new characters. It's giving us the history of the Jade Ring, which I think is important. Fills in the gaps from the show. But it's also given us what eventually brings our hero Agent Cooper to Twin Peaks. It starts with Meriwether Lewis.
Yes, it starts with it starts with them. It starts with them mapping out the United States. It goes that far back.
And we'll see many strange characters with the ring at certain points of their lives.
Yes. And it also brings to the point, the ring, what it does is it fulfills someone's desire, but after it does it, it destroys them.
Yes.
It's essentially a deal with the devil, or a deal with the Black Lodge, as it were.
Yeah, and we also find once you've encountered the Black Lodge, it has a certain influence over you after you don't even have to. Maybe you don't even have to enter it, but it seems people who get near it or have an association with it, they can be influenced by it. Mm-hmm. So we'll find out later. It draws Douglas Milford,
Oh,
he has a childhood experience and he's drawn back at a certain point for reasons he doesn't understand.
yes. So after, then it goes to kind of explain how the Ring basically got Meriwether Lewis Clark killed.
Killed. He committed suicide. He shot himself in the back of the head twice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lewis. He's now after the expedition. It hints that the Ring guided him on for the rest of the Lewis and Clark expedition. They ran into very little trouble after he is in contact with. He has the Ring. He becomes the governor of the Northern Louisiana territories, I think.
Yes, one Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm
Wilkinson is
Wilkinson's something else, but yes, he becomes the governor of the Upper Louisiana Territory.
Yeah, and Wilkinson is a saboteur of the early United States. He's up there with Benedict Arnold and so forth. It's heavily implied he has Lewis killed.
Mm-hmm.
And Lewis is he's going to go talk with Jefferson. He becomes wildly paranoid. We'll see the Ring brings this element on to the other wearers. They're paranoid. They're kind of going off the rails. He's found dead.
Yep.
His Masonic apron is found later on with not only his blood, but it's blood of two other individuals, which is odd, but it kind of points in the direction that Wilkinson had him murdered, and then Wilkinson is now in possession of the Ring.
Yes. And there is a lot of masonry in this book. And, I'll say it, it's my first time really saying it on this podcast. I actually am a Freemason, so I found this really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I knew that. I just wasn't, I know some people just aren't comfortable talking about that personal of their lives, so I just kind of left it. But I just wanted to ask you, because there is a lot of like the imagery and a lot of the owl cave symbol. It looks like a lot of things like I've looked up or have seen associated with Masons. What is your take on that? Like Mark Frost's use of some of the, I guess it's pretty liberal use of it, but
yes, there's definitely a liberal use of it. And when you look at it, you could tell that he knows some about the Freemasonry. Either he was in it, or a family member was in it, or he researched like real things about it, not the conspiracy theory shit. Because let me tell you guys something. If I had the kind of power that people think with the Freemasons, our show would be blowing up way more than what it is.
Are you saying the Illuminatus trilogy is lies?
I am saying that the Illuminatus trilogy is all lies. But what I will say is he uses some imagery but kind of distorts it. You know what I'm saying? So there's things in it where I could go, okay, now that I've read this book, I see where he got some of like the owl cave ring symbol and some of the other symbols of like the owl cave that they used. Yep.
Yeah, but we see he uses that not only with the masonry, but he plays that in the sandbox of history, where he'll take very real incidences, especially when it comes to the government's investigations into UFOs, and later on with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, and that he's playing in a sandbox with real events, but infusing some Twin Peaks into it.
Yeah, it's really well done too, because you can tell when you read these things that Mark Frost does really love history, and it's really interesting seeing him. And he's not even it's not shoehorning; it's actually like thought and methodical, and it written in a way that would be believable. Like I could see someone reading this who's not familiar with what Twin Peaks is, and going, "Really, this is what happened?"
He's like, well, yeah, a part of this happened.
Yeah.
So, and I think now I think so. This kind of sets the tone for the Ring, and then the book goes in kind of like the formation of the town of Twin Peaks, the houses, the people who show up and who kind of run the town. We meet the Packards, the Martells, the Horns, and this kind of gives us a little more. Reading this book and kind of getting like this, this history for these characters that I've watched for 30 years now, it made me enjoy the show when we were rewatching it a lot more.
Yes. But you jumped ahead a little bit there because we got to talk about Chief Joseph.
Oh, Chief Joseph. Yeah, he ends up with the ring at one.
Yes.
There's Absolutely. A big... Yeah, so Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, he's... this is in the final days of basically the Native American War. The United States pretty much declared a war on the Native Americans and to grab their land.
Yep. And after because Lewis
and Clark
had these Indians sign these treaties, or the Native Americans. I shouldn't say Indians. That's highly offensive. I apologize.
Yeah, they signed treaties, but if you've read "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee," these treaties are just shit on by the United States government. They took advantage of these people in a horrific way, just tricking them, not even speaking the same language. It's just awful. And Chief Joseph is one of the last holdouts. He wants his land. They had this agreement with Lewis and Clark. And the government finds a way to be like, well, they violated that treaty. You guys violated that treaty by blah, blah, blah. And they're going to take the land. So Chief Joseph starts hightailing it out to Canada. Very real thing, in history where Sitting Bull made his big escape to Canada and welcomed them until they decided they're not welcome anymore.
Right. Yeah, and it basically talks about that Chief Joseph was never a hostile tribe and had never before been called to serve his people as a military leader. But despite that, he returned from this mysterious pilgrimage, which led to him getting the ring, and led his people on one of the greatest tactical retreats in history, in which they engaged in a series of 13 battles or skirmishes against more than 2,000 soldiers, cavalry, and artillery under the command of one General Howard.
Yes. Chief Joseph makes an amazing escape at one point, which soldiers can only describe as he led his people right through a mountain. So we're getting hints that he's using the ring in a way to help his people. His intentions are not like the other people will come across with the ring. He's more like, his objective is to help his tribe. But the ring does not care what your intentions are.
Nope.
He's successful, but then he has his downfall in that he's surrounded right before the Canadian border.
Yep.
And forced into reservations.
Exactly. And then we think that it kind of implies that the ring kind of disappears.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, the ring disappears. From what we know from especially the Return shows it that this ring, it vanishes and reappears at different times. We'll see that in the Return. At certain points, people have the ring. That raises the question, is there more than one? At least I raised it. I haven't watched the Return in a while, so if I'm wrong in this, listeners, let me know. But it feels like there's more than one of these rings.
It's very possible because, as we talked about in Fire Walk with Me, they bring up the green Formica table, and so they may have made more than one ring.
Yeah, we'll discuss it in the Return because I feel like there's Mike has the ring, but then Mr. C's accomplice has the ring too. So I don't know how it operates.
And some woman that is just kind of a rando That's actually a famous cameo. Has the ring at one point as well.
Yes. So we don't know how the ring operates, but again, one of our listeners wrote an incredible column about the Jade Ring, and I'd suggest it's at 25 Years Later, the website, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So he did a deep dive on this, deeper than me and Paul.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank God there's people out there who are more invested in this than I am, and we're pretty invested.
Yeah, absolutely. Very invested.
So after Chief Joseph, the ring takes a backseat for a while, and then we get to the formation of the town of Twin Peaks. Like I said, we get the history of the Martells and the Packards. Packards put the Martell sawmill out of commission.
Yep.
Ben Horn's great-great-grandfather, builds a department store, blah, blah. So we're getting kind of like this random history, but it's not as random as we're led to believe. This is kind of, it leads us into, of all people, Andrew Packard.
Yes. Well,
little Andy Packard.
Before we get to little Andy Packard, because it becomes a big deal, let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned him in the beginning, Denver Bob.
Bob, yes.
Yeah, because they find Owl Cave, and you are not supposed to be fucking with Owl Cave.
Yeah,
and
at least at this time, we kind of learn in the show that it becomes like a local area where the kids smoke pot and drink and shit.
Yep.
But at this time, it's very new, not as populated, and it's very protective of itself.
And what's really cool in the book is you get the map that you saw at the season finale of 2, or towards the end of the season in 2, which has the Grove. You actually has like the 2 Twin Peaks. So because they had written this out, but Denver Bob's gone. His buddy's like, all the shit's here, all of his gear here, including his rifle. He never went nowhere without that Spencer. Figure I'll hold it for him. Fuck this shit. I still got my compass. I know the trail. Heading back to Spokane, pronto.
Yeah, and they describe hearing like a low hum. We hear this in the return. We hear it in Ben Horn's office. He's driving him and his assistant nuts.
Yep.
So this kind of like it shows me that, and I just want to kind of talk about this now that Lynch is claimed. He said he's never read the book. And people kind of became into camps of like Team Lynch, Team Frost. I think that's stupid. I honestly don't think there's anything in this book that Lynch doesn't have an idea about.
Exactly. I think because he said, I don't have to read it. I know it. Yeah. Because, this is very much both Frost and Lynch. This is just that narrative that Frost was really good at in working with Lynch, because Lynch, as you know, we've talked about it, we love Lynch, but he has some issues with writing.
He's not the best writer.
No.
He's a great visual storyteller. His writing is not his strong suit. Whatever. I think a lot of this was probably stuff they had to take out of the return, just because, that thing was already sprawling enough, but they took 4 years to write that, people. So obviously some of this was probably discussed at some point over the 4 years of writing that season.
Yes. So now we are introduced to a very young Andrew Packard.
Yeah. I love how people who don't work in newspapers don't understand how newspapers work. You're not getting a front page story by a boy from a scout.
Well, it is the Twin Peaks Gazette in 1927. But yeah, you're right.
But Andrew, young Andrew's a scout. This is before he's corrupted later in life.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on a camping expedition with his scoutmaster, Dwayne Milford.
Yep.
Good old Dwayne.
Good old Dwayne. Later be the
Longtime
mayor.
mayor of Twin Peaks.
Long time mayor of Twin Peaks.
They go on a camping expedition where things become go strange on them in that they come across Glastonbury Grove. They see the sycamore trees and the oil in the pit.
Yes.
It gets everybody lightheaded. They start, their memories are kind of fading in and out. They can't really recall what's going on. We see this in the show, and we
do.
So it's and I believe we briefly kind of, between just you and I, we talked about it at one point, but not recorded. But this is where we think the fireman intervenes.
Right. This is where we get,
because they seem to be activating the Black Lodge, and so a storm comes out of nowhere to get these people away from Glastonbury Grove. Storm out of nowhere too.
And what's really interesting is that you don't see, like, when you're reading the book, you don't really know about the firemen, so you think it's the giant. But really what this book is introducing you to is the firemen.
Yeah. We get introduced to a couple new characters. The firemen, we've known him as the giant. He's part of the White Lodge, and he intervenes when things are going awry.
Yes.
When the Black Lodge is overstepping their bounds, the fireman steps in too.
Yep. He's kind of the sheriff or the mediator. Yeah. He's like, all right, shit's getting out of control. I'm gonna have to come out here.
Yeah, we'll have a long discussion on the firemen when it comes to part 8 of the return.
Fuck yeah, we will.
But right now, we just know him as from what we know, he's an entity, so he's kind of protecting these children from the Black Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
He's Storm. He even has a lightning bolt strike down a tree to scare Andy and everybody to get into their tents.
Yes.
But Andy sees him though.
Yeah. And well, I was going to say, what we learn is that it wasn't just Dwayne Milford that was there. He reads a part here. I'm going to do it now. This is from a private diary entry from Andrew Packard. This is the section of my story that they left out of the printed edition in the Gazette. They told me at the time they ran out of space, but I think it's because they had a whole lot more to do with the fact that Douglas Milford was, at the time, living in sin with Pauline Kuya, the estranged daughter of the owner of the Gazette.
Such an old-timey thing saying that, too.
Living in old-timey thing. So we find out that both the Milfords were there and were scoutmasters.
Yeah. Dwayne had seen something like this before on his own. Dwayne is not here with Andy and... Doug is not here with Dwayne and Andy. Doug had an experience a few months before.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
And it caused him to get kind of paranoid and excited, and he ends up at a scout meeting, like a semi-national meeting or something like that, where he's bringing up this thing he saw in the woods, and he's getting quite angry about it and worked up to the point where he ends up punching out his brother who's trying to calm him down, and then he's forever banned from the Scouts.
Right, yeah, so I'll read into this. So So next month, Douglas brought this incident up at the Regional Scoutmaster Council in Spokane, interrupting the proceedings and demanding that unless the Scouts launched an all-out investigation, he would bring it before the National Scoutmaster Council. Dwayne tried to calm down his agitated brother, but sadly the evening ended with Douglas decking Wayne with a right cross, at which point he was removed, kicking and shouting from the Scout Hall. This was followed by the council passing a unanimous motion to strip Douglas of his Scoutmaster rank and expel him from the organization.
And we've seen something like this before in the series. Uh, just being obsessed with whatever's in the woods and whatever at Glastonbury Grove. We see almost the identical thing happen to Wyndham Earl. We have the video of him talking about the Black Lodge and the entities in the woods. Everybody's thinking he's losing his mind, and he's obsessed with it. I think the same. This is kind of showing that this happened to Doug. How many 60 years before? So
yep.
And then Dwayne at one point kind of it's like maybe Doug, maybe he did this. Maybe he was like pretending to be a giant, and Andy
right.
Like, well,
yes.
Unless Doug figured a way to stride over 7 feet.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. He tries to pin it on Doug, but him getting kicked out of the Scoutmasters sends Douglas on a wild journey, and who was a throwaway character in the second season, we find out was a major character.
Yeah, this is the brilliant what I was not expecting, and this is probably going to be the main thing we're going to be discussing through this book. We're just kind of giving you guys like a sense, but Douglas Milford's story leads us right to not only the original run of the show, but what he sets forth brings us even to the return. In season 2, he's just this schmuck who marries
the femme fatale.
Yeah, and dies having sex.
And he gets in a fight at the funeral at Leland's wake.
That's where he proposed to her too.
Yeah, that's when he proposed to her at a funeral, at Leland's funeral. Oh my God.
So, all right, let's talk Douglas Milford. So,
fuck yeah.
Because he's the meat and potatoes of this book, which was the left turn I was not expecting. So Douglas, he's kicked out of the Scouts. He's kind of he's now got this rivalry with his brother. He becomes the town drunk for a while.
Yes.
He's just not dealing with things. A lot of this you can contribute to what happened to him when he encountered Glastonbury Grove.
Right.
He saw a large walking owl, and he saw the giant. His experience was probably more nefarious than what happened to Andy and Dwayne. He's just kind of fucked up, and he ends up leaving to just ride the rails. Depression hits. It's what a lot of people are doing. There's no work. They're trying to find a purpose in life. Yep. He finds himself in San Francisco,
riding whales around, doing odd shit, and then ends up in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor happens. He enlists in the military right away. And then in his early military life, he's a fuck up too.
Yes, he's a total fuck up.
He's reprimanded for selling black market liquor and cigarettes.
Yes. Milford was brought up on serious charges of black market trafficking of stolen Army property, primarily liquor and cigarettes.
And so he's bouncing around.
What happens is that rather than endure the normal protocol of a court-martial, it appears Milford instead offered to volunteer, quotes, for a special detachment stateside.
Yeah, which brings him to first. I believe he's
so he ends up New Mexico.
Yeah, he first is in White Sands.
He ends up in White Sands. Yep.
That's a big incident we'll talk about in part 8 of The Return, but Douglas Milford was there when the Manhattan Project split the atom and gave the world Bob.
Yep.
And then he ends up in Roswell working at a PX when the infamous UFO incident in Roswell happened. He's a real son of a bitch, so he steals a truck.
He steals a truck and goes to the incident, which leads him getting interviewed by the Men in Black.
Well,
Oh,
no, he's
G-Man.
interviewed by
Yeah,
a
it's a
G-Man.
G-Man.
He's
Mm-hmm.
interviewed by a G-Man. So he steals a truck. He goes out there. He's seeing things he probably shouldn't be seeing, which is that's military government talk. He's being kind of questioned. He's cocky as shit. He's complaining about the coffee at base and wants a cigarette.
Yep. He's as cocky as shit. And then he does the most brilliant thing at the end of this. He said, it looked like, who did you say? Just say who you saw. Looked like it was General Twining. And he says, Nathan F. Twining, commander of the Air Material Command. Yes, sir, that General Tilling. The recording is interrupted. Then it resumes with, what did the general do when he first arrived to the scene? And Douglas, just the cocky bastard he is, he basically says, listen, no disrespect, sir, but would you mind if I spoke briefly to your superior officer? Why? You could tell him that this isn't the first time I've seen something like this.
Yeah. And so I'm reading the book for the first time, and I'm getting pissed off now because I'm like, oh God, are they making the Lodge into these space aliens? Mm-hmm. I'm livid.
Yes. Because you do not do space aliens.
If they're going to be doing this, then I probably have no interest in season 3.
But it's, tell them about Ken Arnold and how you didn't know that Ken Arnold was a real person.
Yeah, so the next chapter, so what happens is Douglas, I'm just gonna bring it up. He keeps getting promoted up in the military. Every time he's reintroduced in a chapter, he has a new higher ranking for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is after Roswell, or around Roswell, there's a slew of UFO sightings in the country, and like the chapter introduces us to Kevin Arnold. Or Kenneth Arnold. Kevin Arnold's from Wonder Years.
Right. Yeah, Ken Arnold is something. I mean, yeah, Kevin is someone different.
Yeah. So Ken Arnold is a well-respected man. He's a pilot. He sees 9 discs in the sky and reports it.
Yep.
I had no idea. I thought, so I'm like, oh, what's, whatever. And then I find out, I kind of look up the name, like, holy shit, this is actually UFO sightings are famous.
Yes.
I had no idea Kenneth Arnold was a real person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, I had a kind of a different approach because, I was really into the X-Files, and as a kid, I was really fascinated by the ideas of UFOs because, my dad... my father was a staunch conservative Republican Marine, and, no nonsense type of guy. Like, he joked around, but he didn't believe in bullshit. But he said to me that, there's 2 things that stand out, that what my dad said to me in his life, which was, one, when he was about 8 or 10, he saw a UFO. He really believes he saw one. And then he had a dream the night before Kennedy got killed that his best friend, who had been killed in Vietnam, was grabbing his head and was saying, "They shot me in the head, Billy. They shot me in the head." These were 2 paranormal or supernatural events that my father, to his dying day, believed in. So, as for me, I got kind of interested in UFOs, but as I've gotten older, I don't think they want to come here.
Yeah, we're kind of we're hillbillies. Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of made a joke that we're kind of like the backwaters hillbillies of the universe. So aliens typically don't want to communicate with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still don't know what to think, but so what happens is Kenneth Arnold reports what he saw. So does I forget his name, Dahl.
Dahl. Yep. Charles Dahl.
Charles Dahl. His son. They see something over Puget Sound.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to kind of what Kenneth Arnold saw. And so we're getting more of these sightings, and Doug Milford seems to have a new job now in the government.
Yeah.
He is the first Man in Black.
He is essentially the beginning of the Men in Black. Yep, he is the first one.
And we see this is the first of many investigative entities in the government. He's part of Project Sign.
Yes.
Which this initial one is to document these sightings and talk to the people and see what's actually happening, and then kind of make them shut up a little bit.
Yep,
because they don't want mass panic.
But under Project Sign, it was much more of a, nicer way of doing it.
Yeah, its predecessor is. We'll get into that because it was more abrasive, and then that really pissed off the people.
Yes.
So they had to reconfigure that.
They had to reconfigure it, but here's the thing.
These are real things too. People.
These are real things. You can look this up. Project Sign was a real thing, and it says the most likely candidate appears to be emerging that Doug Milford was working for was the emerging Project Sign, investigating the sightings, but also suppressing information, intimidating witnesses, stifling inquiry. At the worst, he's guilty of sabotage and even murder. This was the nice version of this.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the people who were shut up or whatever. It turns out the government basically either bribed them or tried to coerce them with personal things they find out about them. Like, if you continue talking about this, we'll expose you for blah blah blah. A lot of times it's left-leaning ideals or whatever, which was just because.
And as we alluded to, when Milford shows up, he just starts getting these random promotions. He's now a U.S. Air Force major.
And so Milford, he talks with these individually. He seems just like with Arnold, he seems generally just there to investigate what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to Dahl and
Harold,
the others, it becomes Dahl especially. He kidnaps his child as a way to intimidate him. It's nefarious. I don't know if these events actually happened, but I wouldn't put it past how government agencies did shit back then.
Right.
It's not outside the realm of reality. Again, Frost is blurring the lines between fiction and reality here by using actual history.
It's
and just put
very much blurred.
Characters.
Because at this point, we start hearing that there was an incident in 18 that was Milford himself that was at Twin Peaks, and this leads to an introduction of a character, Robert Jacoby.
Yeah. Sound reporter.
Lawrence's
brother.
Yep, Lawrence's brother.
Yes.
And I have to report that the reporter for this story is the older brother of Dr. Lawrence Jacoby, a psychiatrist.
And they use Russ Tamlin's photo for him.
I know, it's so awesome. He looks as just it's a very, very young Russ Tamlin.
I love Russ Tamlin. So.
I do too. I mean, obviously that was like a studio shot or like a headshot for him.
His younger acting years. Around probably the time he was in West Side Story with Richard Bramer.
Exactly.
Both of them were in West Side Story.
Both of them were in West Side Story, which is awesome. So then we start getting getting more into kind of the alien stuff again, UFO experiences. But then Robert writes about 3 children vanishing.
Yeah, but this is preceded by a chapter before the children go vanishing. This is preceded by, so Project Sign is now kind of turning into Grudge. It's in the in-between area between Project Sign and Project Grudge. They're listing these sightings of UFOs that they're taking seriously out of the hundreds and thousands that are being reported. Two of them are right out of Twin Peaks.
Mhm.
One of them's done by one of the members of Project Sign, and it's Douglas Milford. And he recites this story so
Yes.
he returns to Twin Peaks because Hank Jennings' grandfather saw a fighter pilot chasing what he's an unidentified flying object.
Yep, Elmer.
Elmer.
Or Einer.
So,
Jennings.
So Doug decides to take this differently than others since he's known in Twin Peaks. He can't really be a man in black because people just know who he is. But he knows Eleanor. And he basically sets him down and has him tell the story. He's just kind of questioning him. Then he starts sprinkling, well, you know, this could just ruin your life, man. People are just going to think you're crazy. he just kind of silences them that way.
Yep.
But after he leaves, he has a strong need to head back to Glastonbury Grove for no reason. It just comes over him. And he goes, he starts walking through the woods, and he gets up there, and he sees 3 children frozen like we saw Annie at the pit. He describes it pretty much similar to how we saw with Wyndham Earle and Annie at the finale. Yes. And he sees a giant entity, and it's pointed out by the Tammy or the archivist. He's not really describing a ship.
No.
He just says this thing is as big as a house. And what we've, from what we've seen in the show, those curtains, the red curtains of the Black Lodge, go way up into the sky.
Yes, they do. So when he kind of comes through and it's daylight again, he notes everything was gone. So were the children. I scoured the area for them and found no trace of anyone's presence, nor did I come across a single piece of physical evidence indicating that a ship or craft of that size had been there. And he gets the fuck out of there.
Yeah, he's not an idiot. Doug's a smart guy. He says that urge that drove him there has vanished.
Yep.
He makes a note of that. And then we get Robert Jacoby's story about 3 children who went missing in the woods for a day.
Yep. And they're all safe and sound.
They're all safe and sound. Robert's an odd reporter. Again, I work in newspapers, so it's hilarious to me to see how people who never worked in a newspaper think news reporters would write.
Right. They're safe and sound. Oh, I know.
So Robert's talking about these 3 children. They're on going in the woods, for school, and 3 of them disappear. And they just kind of vanish. Doug saw them vanish. And oddly, these two of them we know.
Yes, we do.
Little Margaret Coulson, a nice log lady. I like how Frost gave her original last name, her maiden name, as the actress's last name.
Yep.
And Carl Rod.
We love Carl Rod.
Oh, Carl, he's been places.
Carl's been places, and he doesn't want to go back.
We now know why. And again, this gave us a little more clue into why Carl was very uncomfortable. Because in Fire Walk with Me, we see what Paul and I agreed is a lodge entity, and it seemed like it just jarred him.
Yep, it was there to be like, hey, keep your fucking mouth shut.
Yep. Yeah, because I could be wrong, but I don't really get indication that Stam and Chet really registered
that it was a lodge entity.
Yeah.
Yep. No, they didn't register.
Some dirty old woman.
Mm-hmm. So we get the physical examination of Margaret, of the log lady, when she was age 7. Go ahead, Joe. You talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Doc Hayward's father is he's the doctor who examines her. Mm-hmm. She's very dehydrated. She drinks a pint of water, but still not soothing her thirst. She has no memory of what happened, but she's got burn marks on her in triangular form. We saw this in the season 2 finale, or in season 2. I don't know if it's the finale or not, but she remarks upon it because Major Briggs has these.
Yes.
And they're all different patterns from the people that get these. The doctor he has that, and he just chalks it up to, like, he doesn't really investigate too hard. It's like, she must have probably got burned or something. She just, it slightly hurts, but he doesn't really care. And then before he leaves the room, she asks, "Is the owl returning?"
Yeah. Which
so this is like, yeah, we're getting multiple references to a large talking owl, which I'm assuming is a lodge entity that we have not seen. We've seen the owls, but not this particular one, leading us to, like, Frost is kind of expanding these entities. He's playing around the lodges a lot, but he's not diving into it as I think that's more of Lynch's territory.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's given us a roadmap to this.
He's given very much a roadmap, and it also kind of starts to point out that there are a bunch of entities that we don't know about.
Yeah, and it all this book shows us there's not only is there more entities, there's more entrance points, which we'll get to. Entrance points to the world in which the lodges reside in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and we'll see that a lot in the Secret History.
Yeah,
or in the Return.
Yeah, and then we have we get a little brief history of Carl. Carl
Rod. Yep, who joined the Coast Guard the year he graduated from high school and climbed the ranks there, serving on a patrol boat under heavy combat during the early years of the Vietnam War. He then he has the owl mark on his back of his right knee, the same one that the Log Lady has. And he kind of, after the war, he got rescued because he was in an earthquake in Anchorage and in the ensuing tsunami, and got rescued by the Aleut people, and which he resolved to live with them for 5 months. It was said by Rod himself that he underwent a spiritual conversion while in their company that saved his life, adopting their deist or animal form of shamanism. He married a woman, but she and the baby died during childbirth. And this sent him kind of on I just picture it as like a total PTSD guy, just kind of wandering after a war vet, trying to figure out where his place is.
Yeah.
And this is where we also get, Joe, why don't you talk about this, because you caught this better than I did. This is where we get the first retcon.
Yeah. There's a couple big retcons in this. Which is kind of explained with the Return and the Final Dossier. I'm not 100% buying that. His Fat Trout trailer park in Fire Walk with Me was in Deer Meadow, but now it's in Twin Peaks, and it's like that in the Return as well. They've moved it, probably just to have this Carl
at Twin Peaks. Yeah. Because we thought that Fat Trout was in Deerwood or
Deer Meadow.
Deer Meadow.
And we were assuming that Deer Meadow is pretty far away from Twin Peaks.
Yeah, just a bit.
But the Final Dossier kind of plays a little loose with this and kind of says Deer Meadow is not that far from Twin Peaks. Yes. I was under the impression it's like an hour or 2 hour drive. Who knows? But yeah, they retcon Carl's trailer park. Now it's in Twin Peaks. And I'll just kind of loosely bring up another one because we're not really going to get into this backstory. Norma's mom is retconned.
Yes.
She's no longer the food reviewer, which is a weird thing.
This is a weird thing, but I think it's because both Frost and Lynch hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in this thing. I think this is where the retconning went in, where Frost and Lynch were like, this never would have happened. So if we had stayed around, this never would have happened. So fuck this.
Yeah,
Get rid
and
of it.
it's here. The other, I'm trying to the other retcon that stands out. We'll get into it. Is with Josie and when she shot Cooper.
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense at all with the show.
No. No, it makes no sense.
Yeah, and then yeah, so there's like a lot of these kind of like weird little incidences that just kind of it's played around with, and I see the normal one, the Cooper one. I might just chalk up to just forgetting what happened when.
Yeah, it's been 25 years. I don't think they went back and rewatched everything. So then we start to hear about Project Grudge, as we talked about.
Yeah,
Grudge
is another real organization. Douglas Milford is promoted up again.
Yes.
This is Spear. He joins Project Grudge at a time when a young Richard Nixon interviews L. Ron Hubbard.
yes, when he was a congressman.
Yeah, Nixon. Yeah, he's L. Ron Hubbard. Hubbard's. He has spent time with one of the co-founders of Jet Propulsion Institutes. What's his name again? Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons. We just want to say, what was the difference between Sign and Grudge was that it was the same people, essentially, same personnel engaging in essentially the same work, but with a different mission. With Project Grudge, it was to not only investigate and report, but debunk any and all sightings of mundane phenomena and outright hoaxes. At this point, it was a full-on disinformation campaign with the U.S. Media.
And what happens? Grudge has a short life, obviously, because guess what? When you call American citizens liars, they're not going to take it well, and they start doing a letter writing campaign to local newspapers, just being pissed off at that Project Grudge personnel, FBI, G-men, and all that, and they had to restructure it pretty quick. But with Grudge, for its short life, Doug is sent to Pasadena.
Yes, but now in the book, we're going to go into that more, because what next comes up in the book is a really weird part that this kind of shoehorned in a way, because now it gets into all the people of Twin Peaks. It goes into a book, a portion of a book that Robert Jacoby wrote. That's not a real book. That goes into we learn more about Catherine and Pete and how they got together. Then we get the Andrew Packard case, and we learn what a fucking badass Josie was.
Yeah, she is. She's Oren from Kill Bill.
She is. Her real name is Lee Chung Fung, and she was born September 2nd, 1956. And her dad was a high-ranking Red Pole officer in a triad gang. Her mother was a prostitute in the triad gang, died from a heroin overdose, and so her father raised her as her, as he started to gain the ranks or got in the second command of the triad. He starts like, hey, this is the family business. Welcome to Triad Country.
Yeah, and it's unprecedented because she's like one of the first women to be able to join the ranks.
Mm-hmm. And so she studied criminality the way a street urchin in the Peking opera learns acrobats. She was brilliant. At 16, she organized and ran her own drug and prostitution ring, entrapping and extorting members of the administration, and with blazing blackmail scheme. Fearing her father, no one would testify against her, and she graduated with honors. She went on to become a runway model and founded her own fashion label, which serves as a cover for her cocaine distribution and sales. And she identifies as a person of interest in a connection of series of accidental overdoses, which eliminated many of her rivals, and a fashion designer who she had a public feud with. I mean, she was cunning to the point where in 1980 she had her father was killed in a gunfire in a nightclub. Go ahead, Joe.
So she had her father killed, and this turns the triad against her. You don't kill the boss.
Yep. She thought she was going to be next in line, and the triad's like, fuck that.
And it's interesting that this part of the dossier is written by none other than Agent Cooper himself. He went to Interpol. He was doing this while he was the post Laura Palmer murder. He was doing this on his own time, and he did it to break some hard truths to Harry, and he leaves it in the bookhouse for him to find this information.
Exactly.
How Cooper, the best way for him to break this to Harry is just showing him the facts. Very methodical, heavily researched. This part of the audiobook's read by Kyle MacLachlan.
Yes.
So it's really cool. And so Josie, and I love this because this gave Josie such a great backstory, and it just made me really love her character a lot more.
Oh, God, yeah.
So to avoid her death sentence, impending death sentence, she vanishes for a bit and then latches on to Andrew Packard.
Yeah, well, through Eckert.
Through Thomas Eckert. Yep. And that's where we get the story from season 2 when Eckert returns.
Yep. And his rivalry with Andrew Packard and how he was using Josie for that. Then, now we're going to get to a part that you love. I don't think we'll dig too much into it unless you really want to, and unless you want to. The Hawk. Ballad of Big Ed and Norman and Nadine.
Yeah. So again, like the show, they deal with the B, C, and D plots, but they make it a lot more interesting.
Very interesting.
A lot. So Hawk has a chapter about Big Ed, about how he was head over heels with Norma, and how because Ed's just bad at communicating his feelings. He keeps blowing it with her.
Yes.
At one point, he just signs up to go join the army and going to Vietnam. Hawk writes this. His vernacular, it makes Hawk such a more well-rounded to me. Way
more well-rounded.
It's just hilarious. He's calling him a jackass.
Yes, you get a different side and you get a more fleshed out version of Hawk that you didn't get in the first season, or the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, and even in the return, we don't get a whole lot of this side of Hawk. It's just enjoyable.
Very.
In the audiobook, Michael Horse reads this, and you can just tell he's having a lot of fun with it.
Yes.
But this also introduces us to another character in the return, and that introduces us to Frank Truman, Harry's brother.
Yep, Frank Truman, who is Harry's brother.
Yep, played by Robert Forster. And this is like, when I read this part, this is what I'm like, oh, this is how they're going to deal with the Harry Truman part in the return, since Michael Longtien, you've told me a couple times he just retires. He just retired from acting and just had no interest in returning.
Yeah, he retired from acting, and he just isn't in the greatest of health from what I've read. I can't confirm that. That's the rumor and innuendo.
And of course, Robert Forster was Lynch's first choice for Harry Truman for the original run of Twin Peaks.
Yes, he was.
So, so we get introduced to Frank Truman here. So they're setting up some of these characters this was the only one that I was like, okay, that's going to be, I was like 99% sure, oh, this is Robert Forster then. That's it. This is that character in the show. I had no idea anything else about it, but I'm like, this is probably what that is.
Exactly. Then we find out that Dr. Jacoby wrote a book.
Oh, God.
Called
Banned by the medical community.
Banned by the medical community. The Eye of God, Sacred Philosophy in the Aboriginal Mind. And when you look at the back of the book,
the blurbs.
The blurbs are amazing.
From Timothy Leary, Jerry Garcia.
Yep. Murmur Baba. It says, Jacoby talks the talk and definitely walks the walk. Timothy Leary. I felt like I was right there with him. Maybe I was Jerry Garcia. I'm speechless. Murbaba.
Yeah, Jacoby publishes this book and is wildly just discredited by the medical community.
Oh God,
This
yeah.
just it was an excuse for him to go do a bunch of drugs.
Yes, absolutely. Which already kind of put him in there, and they give you a better idea. So I'm going to read a little bit of just kind of the way that when he gets Norma's psychiatry, he was Norma's psychiatrist. And
No, Nadine's.
Nadine, I'm sorry, Nadine's. Yes, Nadine's.
After Nadine got her eye shot out.
Her eye got shot out. And I'm just going to read the first line. Wow, patient is really whacked out, poor thing. I mean, she is hip deep in the shit.
Yeah.
This is on his official medical report.
Oh, Jacoby. Yeah. We find out later how he was attending Laura Palmer was found to be so wildly unprofessional. He's disbarred from practicing medicine.
Yes, he gets disbarred.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So what does he do? Well, we'll find out in the return.
Yeah. We find out in the first step. Well, we'll get to it, but yeah. So we're getting this kind of background of like these characters, and again, it makes watching the first season and first two seasons much more enjoyable, knowing these histories of these people.
Mm-hmm.
It also eventually it also answers a question of what happened in the bank.
Yes.
At the finale, Pete Martell dies a hero. He dies saving Audrey Horne.
Mm-hmm.
We find that out. Andrew Packard is killed, but since he was already assumed dead, the powers that be decided not to. The paperwork would probably be too much for that one.
Yep. So
it's great because the archivist is like, he has this line that's like, Andrew Packard rose from the dead only to go hurtling back to his grave.
Yes. This time Andrew stayed dead. The explosion was explained away by the tragic outcome of a gas leak. And we also get an amazing picture of Delbert Midler.
Poor Delbert, a week away from his retirement.
A week away from his retirement, he pulls up in a bank.
And I gotta say, I did like that. Lynch brought him back for Fire Walk with Me, even though it's in the missing pieces. It was great seeing another scene with him complaining about the 2x4s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Audrey she's in a coma. Ben Horne finally wins the worst business decision in television history.
Yes. So I want to read one thing here about Pete being a hero, because God damn it, I love Pete. It's been confirmed that he intentionally shielded one of the victims, as Pete Martell was found laying on top of Audrey Horne. So, I mean, yeah, when this explosion's going on, he knew he was going to die. He saw Audrey there. I mean, this guy was a heart of gold.
Yeah,
and
Pete was such a great character.
Such a great character. And it makes sense, like, in season 1 when he goes into the fire. This totally resonates as a Pete thing that he would do. Yes.
I'm glad they treated it like that. We got some closure because a lot of the actors had passed on by this time. And a lot of them would die after the return comes out, or before the return came out. You'll see it in the end credits of almost every episode of the return. It's dedicated. Each part's dedicated to another one of the actors who had passed on.
Yep. Yeah. Each episode is kind of dedicated to people.
Yeah. Jack Nance died in the late 90s. Tragically. He had an interesting life. There's a documentary out there on him.
Yes. Obviously, Del died.
God damn Del.
God damn. Obviously, he died, given how old he was in the original series. And so we find out that the death of Pete, the death of Andrew, even the death of Josie, it all fucked with her.
Yeah, she becomes a recluse.
Yep.
Again, with the continuity, I don't know how the archivist talks about she became a recluse for months and then has like the slip of sale to Ben Horne, considering he vanishes pretty quickly after the events of the the finale. So
Yes.
again, this is I just think it's just writer's error.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, that's essentially what we get. And then, I'm not going to really get into Ben Horn. We find out a little bit more about
So
what
we know
happened
Audrey.
to Hank.
So Audrey's in a coma. This comes into play with the return.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah, it's gross.
Her fate is so
Tragic.
depressed. It's just, yeah.
But we'll get to that when we get to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we kind of get so this kind of wraps up some of the lingering cliffhangers that obviously Lynch didn't give a shit about.
Obviously, Lynch didn't give a shit about.
It doesn't get a lot of. Obviously, Ben Horn didn't die when Doc Hayward beat the shit out of him.
Right, which is what we thought happened because he looks like he's dead at the end of the season.
Yes. So we get this, and then we got the confusing timeline of Josie shooting Cooper.
Yes.
It says Cooper was investigating her. He wasn't.
No, he was not.
But it says shooting after the Laura Palmer case is solved, and we know it was the cliffhanger to season 1. So that's another thing. That seems like a weird error to introduce.
It does seem like a weird error to introduce. I always read into it that more she was afraid he was there because of her.
Yeah, just when I reread it, I was just, and it's the timeline's just off. The way
absolutely.
He's not wearing the vest because he's anticipating Josie's going to shoot him. He's wearing the vest because he just got back from the Jacques Renault.
No, yeah.
So let's go back to Douglas Milford.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's what we get next. We get Douglas Milford and this amazing story arc.
This is stuff I had no idea about. Again, I was surprised. I didn't know anything about Jack Parsons. I had no idea L. Ron Hubbard spent time with Jack Parsons. So we got young Congressman Nixon talking to a young L. Ron Hubbard.
Yep.
Hubbard is there to basically throw Parsons under the bus. So we find out he's doing this. He's ripped off Parsons at this point in history.
Yes.
Parsons is threatening lawsuits, so L. Ron Hubbard does what L. Ron Hubbard is famous for, throwing people under the bus and basically getting the government to blackmail Parsons to shut up. And so L. Ron Hubbard's a giant piece of shit. He was in real life. He's in this book.
Yes. And these things are fairly accurate. Because...
Hubbard did spend time with Parsons. Parsons was into black magic.
He was in the Thelmia.
He was a student of Aleister Crowley.
Yep.
These things are all true. And Hubbard did steal a lot of these ideas to create Scientology.
Scientology, absolutely. He took a lot of the ideas of Thelmia. And when he ran off with one of Jack Parsons' girlfriends, his main girlfriend, because Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were on his property doing a lot of sex magic and orgies and black magic that called for it. Well, he stole Parsons' woman, and when he ran off, that's when he wrote Dianetics. By taking a lot of this.
He also stole $20,000 from Parsons.
He also stole $20,000 from Parsons.
And so he's getting this threat of lawsuit, so he's throwing the government, he's ratting on Parsons in a sense to get Parsons to get off his back.
Mm-hmm.
And this ultimately ruins Parsons' life because, to be Jet Propulsion, that company is such entwined with military technology that they can't have... this is a PR nightmare in a sense.
100%. Now, what's interesting to me is a lot of people know about L. Ron Hubbard, but tell us more about Jack Parsons, Joe.
Jack Parsons was a brilliant guy. He revolutionized rocket science at a time when most scientists thought that was just that's 20, 50 years in the future. No, he was able to, in real life, he was able to do it. Now, in the book, he's also assisted by the ring. The ring returns.
The ring returns, and it's on Jack Parsons' fingers.
Yeah. Hubbard tells Nixon Parsons is... He spends his time there. He's observing him, and then he's seeing that Parsons becoming more and more paranoid, which is, obviously that happens with drugs and money, but it also happens when you're wearing the jade ring too. He talks up with Parsons at one point in Parsons' private study, and he sees Parsons fidgeting with the ring. And at one point, he's talking about he sees the magician longs to see, and Hubbard's like, "What?" And Parsons ends the conversation after he realizes that he's going into the lodge entities is like kind of influencing him, and then he has to shut up because he doesn't want Hubbard to know too much.
Yeah, no, he doesn't want Hubbard to know too much.
But him and Hubbard, they find what is turns out to be another entry point to the Lodge Worlds.
Yes.
In the desert in California.
Yep. Hubbard doesn't know that, but it's implied that Parsons did.
Parsons knew that because Crowley told him that there is multiple points into this other world. And what's interesting is having seen The Return, and then going back to this, like what Parsons is trying to summon in the desert is not only just an entry point, which is like Hell's Cavern or something, and it's to bring on the Whore of Babylon.
Yeah. Yep.
Which, what he's since they don't have a full understanding of what they're trying to summon, we can pretty much surmise he's trying to summon Judy.
He's trying to summon Jowdy. Yep. So, yep.
And we know to an extent something happened out there that Parsons himself will never talk about.
No.
Hubbard will never talk about.
No, it really fucked him up. Yep.
So Douglas Milford under Project Grudge, after his kind of downfall with Hubbard, he goes out there posing as a left-wing reporter.
So, well, before we get that, I want to read something about L. Ron Hubbard that is true that's in this book. L. Ron Hubbard, after putting out Dianetics in 1950, claimed that he only infiltrated what he called Parsons' sex cult on assignment from the military intelligence as an undercover officer. And it needs to be pointed out that he was discharged in 1945 as a braggart, liar, and opportunistic psychopath.
Yep.
So he was hated in the military.
Hubbard was hated everywhere, and with good reason. He was a sack of shit.
Was a sack of shit, but you know what? He was totally primed to be a cult leader.
Yeah. He's like, reading up. So if you want to know more about Hubbard, Going Clear is a great documentary on how giant piece of shit L. Ron Hubbard was, and Leah Remini's show on Scientology. There's a lot of parallels from what I've read about Hubbard and like what I've read about other cult leaders like Charles Manson, David Koresh, and all that. Is like they're opportunists.
Yes.
Who are
he shares a lot of that.
He shares a lot. Like if you
he shares a lot of traits.
Yeah, from what I've read, he's a sociopath, and he steals Jack Parsons' girlfriend, who he marries while he's still married to his first wife. And interesting in Scientology text, that second wife they stole from Parsons is never spoken of and never acknowledged as one of his wives.
Yep. Nope.
That's a real fact.
That's a very real fact. And so now we got Milford coming in to interview a disgraced Jack Parsons.
Yeah. He does this. He does 2 interviews with Parsons. He does this first one in California. Parsons is in early 30s.
Yep.
He's just, life has got him down. He tricks him into, talking. Parsons he tells him about the stuff that we've talked about, like bringing Hubbard out to the desert, tried to summon something. When Milford asked more about what happened in the desert, that's when Parsons' wife shows up, honking a horn, telling him, he's like, "Oh, I gotta go."
Yep. And I will say this too: what brought about this fall was because L. Ron Hubbard ratted on him to get himself out of trouble.
To get himself out of the lawsuit because he stole $20,000 from
right. And you have to understand that in this point in history, there very much was a real House of Un-American Activities Committee.
Oh yeah, that lasted up until the early
That
70s.
that lasts up to the early 70s with the famous "Have You No Decency."
Yeah,
Um,
HUAC. Yeah,
yes, and that's parts true. Parsons was targeted by the House of Un-American Activities
because Hubbard threw him under the
because
bus,
Harvard threw him under the fucking bus.
and it ruined his life. He was never able.
Yes.
His security. So the first interview Milford does is to see if he's should still, because he's still kind of working. He still has his security clearance. Milford's like, this guy should not have his security clearance. Good enough guy, but he can be more trouble than he's worth, sort of thing. This ruins Parsons' life even
more because he's suddenly killed in a Pasadena explosion.
Yeah, that's a few years later.
Yep.
A few years later, Milford comes back.
Mm-hmm. Milford comes back in 1952, and
Parsons' apartment has these explosives and weird things. He sees that Parsons still working on different jet fuel ideas, which he's technically not supposed to, but I mean, I guess that's a gray area. You can't really tell people writing out formulas they can't do that.
Right.
He also has like a giant black devil skull painted on his wall. Parsons is like off the rails, and he still has the ring.
Yes. Yep, he still has the ring, and it was it's highly suspect that it was.
Well, the book, this dossier, this Twin Peaks version, it implies Doug had him blown up.
Yeah, had him blown up, or he summoned a fire demon. So yeah, those are the one or two options that
I'm leaning towards Doug had him blown up.
I'm leaning towards Doug had his ass blown up. So now we start getting into Project Blue Book, which was also a very real thing.
Yeah, Project Blue Book, and we know this from obviously this is in the show. This is when Briggs talks about his work with Project Blue Book to Cooper when he has the readout that says Cooper, 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 and the owls are not what they seem. Blue Book was it was ultimately more of a PR reaction to what Grudge was, and this is very real. Grudge, like I said, pissed off a lot of people.
Yep.
You call people liars, and at this point, so many people are seeing this sort of phenomena that you're creating more unrest by making them angry.
Yes, so because they just put everything up as mass hysteria, and the public's response was "fuck you."
And so Blue Book was more successful in that it pretty much tampered it down. Like, yeah, we're looking into it. It's more open-minded. The book says it's because the leadership's like, no, I want answers. And like with Grudge, was very
they didn't want answers.
Singly focused on just one answer, and that absolutely not. So Blue Book comes along.
Yep.
Also along with Blue Book is a shadow, another project being run by the Council of 12.
Yes.
And that's called Project Gleam.
Yes.
Gleam is actually, we find out in the book, is doing most of the heavy lifting on these things. We find out that Gleam is sending Milford on wild goose chases, which turn out to not really be that. Like, Milford, Forrest Gump, he somehow gumps his way into like these big cases.
Oh God, yeah, he does. Oh God, yeah, he does.
Yeah, Project Gleam is kind of like the side, even secret or more secret version of what Blue Book is doing. And we have a little bit of Paperclip, Project Paperclip, if you want to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, Project Paperclip was also a very real thing. After World War II, all the major countries signed a treaty basically saying that we would not accept any medicine or medical advancement that came out of the Nazi, what they did to the Jews and minorities at concentration camps. It was just gory, and that, we were gonna basically not have anything to do with any one of these Nazis. Well, Russia it's debatable, on which side started first. But Russia starts nabbing some of these Nazi scientists. So America started nabbing Nazi scientists, started putting them in NASA and in government positions. And really, people wonder what kind of happened in the 50s and 60s with all this hatred of counterculture. It's because of Project Paperclip. These Nazis, these fascists, were put in positions of power.
Yeah, real thing. It's history is not very. It's not a lot of feel good moments in history.
No.
So
that's why we mark big events by war.
Yeah. So Blue Book starts. Milford as now. He's part of that. He's slowing down a bit though now. He's still working, and he also has an insider in the Eisenhower administration called M. Turns out his liaison is Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm.
Nixon has a very intense interest on Project Blue Book. He wants He wants to eventually, over 10 years, up until his election, he's very interested in creating his own M12, the Council of 12. He wants to create his own version of that. So he's in liaison with Doug. And then when he's elected in 1968, he has big plans for Douglas Milford in that we're going to get down to this. We're going to figure this out. I want you to covertly create a team of people you trust, and we're going to do this off the books. It's not uncommon in federal government and intelligence. These things happen. And then, Doug decides to move back to Twin Peaks, buys the newspaper. He's kind of settling down a little bit more. And he has summers in Florida where he gets a call from an intoxicated Richard Nixon to come out and visit him. He does. It's Richard Nixon and a redacted person we find out is Jackie Gleason. So Nixon has Doug and Jackie Gleason there, and he's a few drinks in. He's like, I want to show you guys something. He brings them to an Air Force base where he shows them first he shows them a craft that could have been a UFO. Douglas is just like, it could have been a trashed car for all I know. He's very professional.
Mm-hmm.
But then what they show, again, Jackie Gleason, what the fuck?
Jackie Gleason, yeah. Why is Jackie Gleason in that? I apologize. I heard you. My mic got cut out for a little bit there, so that's why you weren't hearing me.
Oh, no.
We know it's Jackie Gleason because at the end of this, there is a picture of fucking Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, and the number that the redacted person gives Doug to call and meet up again after this is to an unlisted number that is Jackie Gleason.
Mm-hmm.
But what they see, the second thing they see, it's oddly familiar to what we see in the glass box in The Return.
Yeah.
They see an alien of some sort. Nixon alludes to it later as a survivor of one of the crashes in Roswell. It glitches, it reappears, it glitches, it reappears. It's a lot what we see of Judy when we do see Judy. I don't think this is Judy. I think it's this could very much be an alien or a lodge entity.
I'm leaning towards that it's a lodge entity, and it's a Jody or Judy isn't necessarily the only big bad, or a powerful lodge entity, or something kind of like Judy that can operate outside the lodge.
Yeah. So this terrifies. Well, Doug's unsettled by it.
Mhm.
He's seen things.
He's seen things and he doesn't want to go back.
Yeah, and this fucks up Jackie Gleason.
Oh, it fucked Jackie Gleason up so bad.
Yeah, he goes through a depression and funk.
Yes.
And during this time, Doug notices that Nixon's also fidgeting with a jade ring.
Yep. Nixon's got the ring, ladies and gentlemen. This can only go one way.
Oh, it does, because 3 months later, Nixon finds out the Supreme Court has ruled against him on an executive privilege on his tapes during the Watergate hearings. And he drunkenly calls Douglas Milford.
Doug Milford in the middle of the night.
The middle of the night. Paranoid as all hell. The enemies of they're out. They're tearing him down. He's nothing's safe. I can't talk.
Yep.
He does. But he wants to continue the research that Doug has been doing with Blue Book. Blue Book's been at this point it's pretty much defunded. Yeah, shut down.
Yep.
It's just his plan is somebody's going to reach out to you. His man in the FBI.
Man in the FBI, the one I told you about. I have his contact. And he's like, well, he's the only one. Wait a while, then set up a meeting.
And don't do it over the phone. Nothing in writing. Just get it done. Who is that liaison, Paul?
That liaison would be one Gordon Cole.
Gordon Cole. I love the idea of the loudest man. I just want to picture him in Nixon's Oval Office with all the recording apparatuses.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine transcribing those notes. Jesus.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah. Gordon Cole is he's the liaison to Richard Nixon.
He's the liaison to Richard Nixon.
And, yeah.
Yeah. Then we find out that it moves to another point where we get to the Blue Pine Mountain.
Yep. And so, yeah. Milford's working with Cole.
Yep.
With
and by the way, we didn't mention this. He's a colonel now, by the way.
Yeah, he's
Colonel Milford. Somehow he's Colonel fucking Milford.
And he has more money than nobody knows where he's getting his money from. He's had 4 divorces at this point.
Yep. No one knows where his money's coming from.
He buys the paper. He settles back down in Twin Peaks, and it's a lot of this is alluded is because of his work with Cole.
Yes.
This is a hotbed now with phenomena with Glastonbury Grove and all that, and they bring in none other than Major Briggs.
Major Briggs, and he puts out Doug Milford, put out a thing in the paper saying "Welcome to town."
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. And how we're happy to have you. Well, someone's not happy about him being there.
Well, because there's things going. Briggs is there to technically to help the airport being built in Twin Peaks with the technology and all that to streamline it. And it's also so his ulterior motive is Blue Pine Mountain.
Yep.
Where there's construction going on. Who's upset by this, Paul?
One Carl Rod, because he's seen things and he doesn't want to go back. I'm just going to read this open letter. Open letter to Mayor Dwayne Milford. This is from the letters to the editor. I don't know what you people think is going on here, but I can tell you it's a whole lot worse than you even know about. Every morning and every evening, I take my walk through the woods, rain or shine, and hear the sounds of construction going on way up in the mountain, just around the clock. It's steep as hell up there. Strange lights at night. Graders driving in, cutting new roads, black Jeeps and helicopters, and a whole lot of cement trucks. Of course, it's all fenced in with those no trespassing or else signs, like it's theirs to do what they please with. This will be our national forest, but no. Armed guards, too, so any Nimrod can see it's military. but you won't see any unit insignias on them. No, sir. I don't know if it's the Knights of Columbus, the Knights Templar, the Illuminati, or the Trilateral Commission. It doesn't matter. They're on a bunch of different costumes anyways. Always have been. So, ever wonder why the symbol of Bohemian Grove is an owl? A big giant statue, one standing out in the woods like some ancient Sumerian deity. It's a story as old as time. If you don't know who's really in charge, you'll never figure out how they're screwing you sideways. Well, what's the price of freedom? The price of freedom is vigilance. So what are you going to do about it, Mr. Mayor? Oh, this sets off a chain reaction.
Yeah, so Milford's away on business. He finds out this letter's printed and fires his editor. Dwayne's wants to look into it. He makes an announcement. He's going to look into it. And oddly out of character, Doug volunteers to help since he has his connections in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne, a couple FBI agents show up. They took a look around, and then they send a letter to Dwayne saying it's top secret, has to something to do with the Star Wars defense.
Yeah, yep, the SETI system. Yep.
Yeah. Signed Agent Philip Jeffries and Agent Gordon Cole.
Yes. FBI Regional Director Gordon Cole, Special Agent Philip Jeffries. This communication is for your eyes only and classified secret.
Yeah. Basically, just tell the people thank you for your due diligence, but there's nothing really going on up here that really needs to concern you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Briggs is now here. He reveals that he is the archivist. Mm-hmm. Around this time, we get a little later. But what happens is there's a chapter on the events of Laura Palmer.
Yes,
we learned that Jacoby's disbarred from practicing medicine, but bringing Cooper to town sets something off with Briggs. Cooper comes and all this phenomena starts happening. He starts having visions, seeing things, dreams.
And I just want to touch on one thing in here because the actress, Catherine Calhoun, was very, very sick.
Coulson, Catherine Coulson.
Yeah, sorry, Catherine Coulson, yes. She was super sick. And they do this wonderful editorial where she writes this big thing about the woods. And it's really kind of humanizes her as a character, but it's not written by her. It's written by Robert Jacoby, and then we find out, we
find out the history of the log. It's interesting. We kind of already knew a sense because she talks about, we hear about her husband dying in the fire. He becomes a liaison with the lodges to her. This fucks her up though, like losing her husband.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
He communicates to her, like their love is so strong and pure. He becomes a liaison for her about what the goings on in the woods. But she goes, she already had the trauma as a child. This trauma is another huge trauma. She becomes a recluse.
Yep.
But it's beautifully written. It gives such a rich backstory to the log lady. Again, the actress, she was very sick. We'll get to it because it's heartbreaking, her last scene in The Return.
Oh, yeah, we'll get in that in The Return. But then we find out Robert Jacoby died. And I love this because it's just another picture of Russ Tamblyn.
Yeah, Russ Tamblyn. Another headshot from probably the 80s.
Right? Fucking amazing.
Log Lady is a nice eulogy for him. But then we learn, like with Cooper now coming to town, Agent Tammy Preston starts kind of looking into the reasons why, and she finds on an old computer. She ran because some names are coming up for the Deer Meadow murder with Agent Chester Desmond and Sam Stanley. Yep. She came up with discovered it from a secure server in the FBI Philadelphia office. She ran a search for Desmond and Stanley and came up with this list of names: Gordon Cole, Philip Jeffries, Chet Desmond, Sam Stanley, Wyndham Earle, Dale Cooper, and Albert Rosenfeld. So this is what we learned is the Blue Rose Task Force.
This is the Blue Rose.
They picked up after Blue Book in the late 70s.
Mm-hmm. And started realizing that things weren't alien. They were the entities and these entry points here to the lodges.
Jeffries vanishes in Buenos Aires. Chet Desmond vanishes. Sam Stanley comes back so shooken after the events in Deer Meadow that he takes a leave, falls to alcoholism, and never returns to the FBI. Which Tammy's like, seems like if you're on this list, unless you're Gordon Cole or Albert Rosenfeld, you have a bad something. You don't have a good ending to your story.
Well,
and at this point, Cooper's missing.
Yeah, and that's something to point out was that this was why Gordon Cole was so hesitant about bringing more people in other than him and Albert at this point, because Wyndham Earle went crazy. Stan Stanley, Chet Desmond disappeared, Phillips disappeared, Dale Cooper disappears. The only ones that are left are Gordon Cole and Albert.
Yeah.
And this, well, we'll get into this part a little bit later, but yeah, so then we find more notes on Laura Palmer and, getting into this big thing written by Jacoby. Then we get, Dear Sir, after consideration of your case, the State Medical Review Board has decided to indefinitely suspend your license to practice medicine as a psychiatrist of Washington. Please be aware that any violation is just a revocation. So, yeah. He wrote a big report about Laura Palmer.
Yeah, wildly unprofessional.
Wildly unprofessional notes in there.
And as we discussed, especially with the missing pieces, his interest in Laura was dark. Dubious. It added to her trauma. Again, I'm glad they left that part out of Firewalk with Me because I just felt like it was piling on at that point.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, he was not Jacoby. He's likable or whatnot, but he's also kind of a piece of shit too. Mm-hmm. He's disbarred. And so the archivist reveals himself as Briggs. He's talking about his more candid conversations with Douglas Milford. Douglas is he's getting up there in age. He wants to get married. He wants to kind of step back. He wants to put Briggs in charge. Briggs is taken up. And we find out that Douglas Milford also compiled almost all the earliest stuff of this dossier. That was Douglas.
Yes, was Douglas's stuff.
And then Briggs picks it up, fills in some gaps, and takes it over. So he's at Listening Post Alpha. What happens is, Douglas leaves. Briggs gets bored with his job. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's just nothing's popping up. Cooper comes and everything, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Not like Agent Cooper sets off Listening Post Alpha.
Yes. Cooper sets off Listening Post Alpha, which is really interesting. So I'm gonna, this is one revelation. It's the Listening Post Alpha. The death of Doug Milford marked the end of an era. It also denotes a sharp transition in the narrative of the many mysteries he sought to answer in his work. That job would now fall on me alone. I am the man that Colonel Milford, in his capacity as commander of Listening Post Alpha, handpicked to succeed him. My name is Major Garland Briggs. Yeah. And so, yeah, then we get kind of some back and forth between them.
Yeah, because Milford is like, you know why I picked you, this sort of thing. They have these conversations. Mm-hmm. Milford kind of like, he started, this is the job, so he's given Briggs the information. He's kind of testing him. Briggs is passing with flying colors because he's a man of integrity, which is Milford's history is rare to come across.
Yes.
Even with amongst Milford himself, he's kind of a piece of shit.
Absolutely.
ruined lives and killed people. But this, the project they're working on now seems more focused than Sign and Grudge and Blue Book to an extent. They're looking a little outward, but they're mostly focusing their energies on the woods of Twin Peaks and Ghostwood.
Yes. And I'll read this part real quick. The appearance of Special Agent Cooper. Colonel Milford confided in me that Cooper's presence here and his association with secret allies of the Colonel's signaled a raising of the ante in our stated mission. Our zone had suddenly gone hot. The data was monitoring went from 0 to 60. Strange phenomenon. From the start, Cooper himself experienced turbulent phenomena. And it goes on to explain one night soon afterward, most unexpectedly, came a breakthrough at the LPA. A message received loud and clear. What was that message, Joe?
Cooper. 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 A string of Coopers. Leading us to believe the multiple Coopers we see in the return. There could be more. We don't know. We only get a focus on Dougie,
yes.
Mr. C, Agent Cooper. But for all we know, there's others out there.
Yep.
Yeah. And he gets the owls are not what they seem.
Yep. And, who does he run this by? Who does he tell about this?
Douglas Milford.
Yep. Because I wanted to tell Cooper about the message, a clear violation of my charter, but Colonel Milford wholeheartedly agreed. Wonder why that was.
Because Milford's working with Gordon Cole. What they're doing is they're grooming Cooper to take over this Listening Post Alpha and work with Briggs on this research. Because it's Blue Rose. It's a hotspot. They've known since Teresa Banks that this is in their wheelhouse, and so they're setting up Cooper to work with Briggs. Because we kind of seen this like Blue Book and like Gleam and all these things. Like it's always like these separate. This is now we're finally seeing entities working together, which would be the military and FBI. Milford. He has a quote later on here, and I just want to say because I read it and it stood out to me as like the perfect explanation of Lynch and Frost's approach to Twin Peaks and how we should experience it to an extent. I quote, "But a real mystery can't be solved, not completely. It's always just out of reach, like a light around the corner. You might catch a glimpse of what it reveals, feel its warmth, but you can't know the heart of it, not really." That to me just kind of sums up Twin Peaks.
100%. Absolutely 100%. And, he has this letter that basically, this printout, this facsimile to Briggs basically says that, whatever steps you take from here, do not act alone. Wait for your next control to appear.
Yeah, which would be Agent Cooper.
Yes.
He leaves this note. Briggs has gone missing. We saw this in the show. While Briggs is missing, Milford dies. But he leaves this note at Listening Post Alpha since Briggs is the only one who really can get there or get in there, I'd imagine. Mm-hmm. And so Briggs is now, he reads this and he's like, okay, it's Cooper. Cooper is the one they sent here. It's all fallen into place. So he wants to talk to Cooper about this. By the time he makes this realization, Cooper's vanished.
Yes.
He calls Lucy, put him through to Truman. Harry's like, he was here, and then he vanished. What happens next is he's like, well, have him call me as soon as he gets back. Cooper comes out. He's tired, but he returns the call, and Briggs is excited. He's like, I get to share all this information.
Yep.
With fun.
This is my new control.
My new control. We're gonna work on this project. Cooper shows up, and just whatever happened, we don't know. We surmise from this, and what we see in the return, he's utterly disturbed by
what happened.
Cooper. Something's changed.
Yep. So I'll read this. So at the very end of this particular thing, he says, only moments ago, While writing this previous passage, Cooper called, as I had requested. He's on his way to the house right now. The bell just rang. He's here. Betty's letting him in. Then at 12:05 p.m., March 28th, 1989, he just left. Something is wrong. The message holds the answer, just as I thought, but I've misinterpreted it. Protocols are in place. I must ask quickly. I'm heading to the LPA alone. Mayday.
Yeah. So that's how it ends.
It says right here. The dossier ends here. And
Yep.
This is where first time we see Tammy's name.
Yep, Tammy, she's submitting it. She's nervous because she feels like it might make her look like a crackpot in a sense. But this is what Cole asked her to do. And at the timeline with the return, I imagine by the time she submits this in the show is when shortly after she's invited to be part of the Blue Rose task force. We see that. Then we'll talk about it next week. But what happens is Listening Post Alpha burns.
Yes.
And Briggs is never seen again. Now, what happens to Briggs? That's a long and winding road.
Oh boy, that is a long and winding road.
Yeah, we got through it. That was Secret History and kind of our takes on it. It's essential for me. I couldn't imagine watching The Return without reading this.
Yep. And I'm going to read the last page. Just real quick here. I don't know what happened to either Major Briggs or Agent Cooper at this point. These are the files on Briggs, both the FBI and the Air Force, and on Cooper at the FBI, that are designated many levels above top secret out of my reach. I've taken my analysis as far as I can. My instructions are clear. I am to turn over the dossier with my findings to the director's office and wait for their response. Deadlines are pressing. I'm guessing if and only if they find my work to date acceptable, they will have me begin breaking down the other data, which I have not seen yet. The rest is out of my hands. I'm still listed on the duty roster as on assignment, but as far as I can tell, I've been removed from active service until that decision is reached. As Director Cole told me that time he took me out for coffee, a big part of this job, and for that matter life, is waiting for the right moment. So this kind of leaves us where we're at. We don't know what happened to Briggs, which we didn't know Briggs went missing after the show.
No.
So that adds this. We don't know what happened to Cooper, but we know something's wrong with him. And this gives the impression that Gordon Cole is grooming Tamara Preston for the Blue Rose.
Yep.
Which will be the first new member in a long time.
That we know of.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't know the extent. We'll kind of get in with the return. I have a feeling that unofficially that our we've been talking so long.
No, you're fine, buddy.
Let's see here. I have a feeling Denise Bryson is part, or at least aware of.
Yes, I think Denise is in on it.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So I would put Denise Bryson in that. Unofficially, her name doesn't show up on that list that Tammy comes across, but I have a feeling our lovely Denise is part of the crew, which is awesome. I love Denise Bryson so much. But yeah, this was a long one, but there's a lot to cover, and it gives us a lot. It sets us forth in the return, and it was fun reading this because like when the return started, it was just like, what were they going with the Secret History? And then they're like, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And I want to say, first of all, I love Denise, and I agree. Denise was part of it. Absolutely, I think was an ally to Gordon Cole, especially since we'll find out. We'll find out what happens with Denise. We'll talk about that when we get to it. This was a long one, and this is a 361 page book. We glossed over a lot of it. Would you say, Joe?
Yeah, a lot of it's giving us backstory, giving us, but ultimately, like, I think we hit the main parts of it. This is Douglas Milford and building the Blue Rose.
Yes. Now, I will say some of the things we skipped over is a wonderful part of the book, and I think really kind of helps. I couldn't imagine, and you and I have talked about this. The secret history of Twin Peaks really is required reading when going into the return. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I probably, return, I felt lost anyway, but I felt like I would have been more lost without the knowledge of the Jade Ring and Blue Rose and all this stuff that we're and like Briggs especially. Yes. Briggs looms large in the return.
And what I didn't realize at the time reading the book, and I don't know if you did either, was that there's this huge section between pages 150 54 to 200 and just 1 second here. 238 that give a lot of backstory and information on the other characters that were in season 1 and 2. What we didn't know was that this was giving us the closure that we wouldn't get with these characters in the return.
Yeah. The return is a whole different, and I see why Frost did this. I just don't think when it came to the return, either of them were that interested in bringing a lot of these characters back and explaining things.
Yeah. Nope.
That was the point of the return. Return has a whole different point to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So this and the final dossier, you get your closure from the original show, and you get a whole new beast with the return.
Yes, you do. And I think we have also talked about this off air. Is that a lot of the ideas that are in here that happen to some of these characters, what we would have seen, and some of the retconning that they did is if first of all, is if Frost and Lynch hadn't left. There's a lot of things in there with that retconning. I feel like this is where they saw the show going because it's been said many times. They never planned on revealing the killer, and they knew what they were looking for. But there was the interference there. And the second point to that was that it was, this is what we would have seen had there been a season 3. This is where they wanted the show to go.
Yeah, I think Briggs would have been a bigger character.
100%. 100%.
They kind of set him up too with that scene in the finale where Sarah comes in and she's speaking Lodge entity talk to him. She tells him that she's in the Black Lodge with Agent Cooper.
And I think that's also, you and I have talked about that. I think that's when we first see Judy.
Yeah. So
yeah. Yeah, but what I want to just, finalize on this book is, it really is, if you are a fan and you're listening to this show, let me put it this way. If you've been actively following our podcast and haven't read this book, you owe it to yourself to run out and get it. Because it will make you feel a lot better about the conclusion of season 2. And, you'll feel like what happened to these other characters that we don't see repeated in season 3.
Yeah, and I think not reading this book, you will never understand the significance of Briggs in the return. His role in that wouldn't make any sense if you
wouldn't make any sense at all. And we're going to talk about, we're going to go through the 18 episodes of the seasons of season 3, and then our final broadcast or our final podcast will be on the final dossier, which I also feel like if you watch The Return and you want some closure, you need to read the final dossier.
Yes, it gives you closure. on a lot of things, especially with a lot of characters that Secret History didn't really get into. Shelley, Bobby, Norma, Annie is a big one. That was good to find out. Although her ending is so fucking tragic.
Oh yeah.
Audrey, we get more Audrey.
Get more Audrey and what she was going through there. Yeah, it's absolutely required.
Yeah. So next week we'll be doing the first episode of The Return. How you feeling about that, Paul? I haven't watched it in like 2 years.
I have not watched it since its original run. But as I said, it's my favorite David Lynch work. We've talked about that on before. And I cannot give it enough love. So I am super excited to watch it again.
I got to say, I'm watching it twice. The second time, knowing what it is and understanding that a little better, it's a lot more enjoyable.
When I watched it, I wanted to see it again. And because I knew that, like, once you know where it's going and you're not watching it week to week, I'll be very honest with you, Joe. I do not watch shows week to week. I wait for when it comes out, like on a streaming service or on DVD. But for the Twin Peaks Return, there was no way I wasn't going to fucking watch it.
Ever. Yeah, absolutely. I was the same way. The only other time I did a week-to-week show was the final season of Breaking Bad. Just because I had an ability to actually see it when it aired or whatever on my schedule. But yeah, other than that, The Return was the first time, first time I paid for a premium channel.
Yep, me too.
I'm glad I was able to stream it because I don't have cable.
Me too. I don't have cable.
So yeah, it was amazing. Frustrating. The Return is the first time viewing of The Return is a fun, really frustrating, very frustrating.
But as we'll talk about it when we get to a particular episode, it makes a particular episode that much more powerful.
Yes. Yeah. This is the Secret History is more fan service. The Return is absolutely not fan service.
No.
You earn it when you get it.
You earn it. Yeah. It is. No, as we talked about, this is pure David Lynch into your veins.
Oh, yeah. All right. And I think with that, let's do some plugs, Paul.
Yeah. Joe, what do you have going on?
Brown and I, we had to put it off just because of scheduling and things. We're still going to be reviewing Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1 because I love torturing Brown by making him go back to Forks, Washington with the glittery vampires. And after that, we have Sports Month. We're doing Any Given Sunday, Mr. Baseball, Bull Durham, and Foxcatcher, which I'm really excited to see Foxcatcher. I needed a reason to actually sit down and watch that. Well, what do you have going on for Cast That Movie?
So Joe and I will be filming or recording the new King Arthur, recasting the King Arthur Legend of the Sword movie that was supposed to be a trilogy but bombed, the Guy Ritchie movie. And then we're going to be, for our dream project, is actually going to be Red Dead Redemption 2. For those unfamiliar, the reason why we're doing 2 is 2 is the prequel to the first game.
A Temple of Doom situation, huh?
Temple of Doom situation. Yep, absolutely. Joe, what else are we working on?
Well, it came out just not too long ago. We got Bears, Beats, and Bobbleheads talking office. Paul and Scott from Cast That Movie decided to do another podcast, and they invited me to be a part of it. Paul, why don't you explain it?
So this is actually a dream project of Jode, whose real name is Scott. We use our superhero aliases when we do Cast That Movie. he wanted to make a podcast about The Office, and he was thinking about a way to do it. And so what this podcast is Scott's a mega fan. Joe, you are a fan. You're about right 7 fan, you would say?
Yeah, 7 out of 10. Yeah.
And I am watching the episodes for the first time the day we record the episode. I have never seen any episode of The Office. I saw the first season of the UK version. That was it. So this is going to be interesting. And we are doing all the episodes. There's going to be 201. Scott figured out there's going to be 201 episodes.
Wow. Yep. We're in for the long run.
We're in for the long run on that one.
And I've been watching ahead. I'm on season 5. I just keep binging it for it. I'll keep going. I'll rewatch the ones just so I'm not confused. But yeah, I haven't watched the show in a few years, so it's a perfect show just to binge watch.
Yes, and I am doing it very differently, where I am literally watching one episode the day we record, so I have it fresh in my head.
Not since Twin Peaks: The Return have you watched the show from week to week.
No, and now I picked the 201 episode show to watch week to week. Fantastic.
Oh.
So, yeah, so what it is it's Joe and Scott talking about their takes on The Office and what they know about, kind of about what things to come. And then they want to get my reaction and as a newbie to the series and kind of see, if I fall in line with them or if we need to go into a conference room and hash it out.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. So far, I love talking Office. It's a lot of fun. If you like us nerding out on Twin Peaks, you might enjoy us nerding out on The Office and Paul being utterly baffled.
Me having no idea about the shit they're talking about. Because they're like, yeah, this episode, this character, the character arc of this person. What fucking character arc? I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. So, well, with that, Joe, why don't you take us out, buddy?
It is in our house now.